Welcome to the MLB Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. Taking a look at tonight's slate on FanDuel and DraftKings. Pretty good slate here. The first thing we talked about was the Wrigley wind is going to be a popular subject on today's slate.
Yeah, it's gonna be something that people are gonna talk about, and just about every slate where the wind is blowing out at Wrigley, people stack the living crap out of that game, and I feel like it's a giant trap because it feels like almost every single time this happens, it is a giant trap and it never works out. That being said, I think it's going to be a popular place to get exposure, and I actually kind of like both pitchers in that game, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind some of those options. I mean, as you mentioned, like it is going to be popular, but there are definitely other games to pivot to.
There's a few that we're going to talk about that I think are better games.
Pittsburgh, Washington here first. Tanner Rourke take on Jameson Taillon. I don't have interest in either of these pitchers. Taillon coming off a couple of rough starts. Rourke is going to face a Pittsburgh team with a decent amount of lefties. I think there's better options on the board here.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, like, this Pirates team does tend to strike out a little bit more on the road, so that helps, their sub 20% strikeout rate. We've seen it in some of these games with, like, Arrieta and a couple other pitchers where they've actually struck out more on the road because PNC does kind of suppress strikeouts. It's weird how that happens. I don't necessarily hate Rourke in the spot as a tournament option. There's not a lot of pitchers that I feel comfortable with in cash today. So it feels like it's a more tournament slate anyway. So I think he has potential in this spot to actually have a good game. I mean, he's completed at least 6 innings in his last 3 starts. So like I don't think it's a terrible spot for him if you're looking for someone that's going to go deep and maybe notch a handful of strikeouts and have a shot at the win.
I'm just worried kind of like if he had one of those giant starts again where, maybe I kind of look elsewhere. Like Eduardo Rodriguez is $100 less on DK. Like you said, like it is kind of a GPP slate. Like there's not a great cash game option that's elite. I kind of just find myself going a couple other directions. But like you said, Pittsburgh is a team. We saw what Fulmer tossed 9, 10 strikeouts the other day. They have been striking out a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
So, um, as far as bats go against him, I don't mind like a Gregory Polanco or Corey Dickerson. I'm kind of off Adam Frazier leading off. I think there's a couple other values I'd rather go, but I don't mind some of the lefties here.
You know what's going to happen now that you said you're off Adam Frazier, right?
He's going to homer.
uh, Probably. I will say, like, if you dig into Rourke's pitches this season, like his curveball's been getting obliterated to lefties. He's allowed a 400 ISO this season. Like if you're looking, Josh Bell is a guy that hits curveballs extremely well. 348 ISO last season against the pitch. You have, Adam Frazier only a 133 ISO against it, but some decent WOBA numbers. Like I don't hate like a Frazier, or not a Frazier, a Josh Bell, or like you said, Corey Dickerson if you're wanting to attack Tanner Rourke here.
Yeah, like this isn't really a spot that this isn't a game that I'm really excited about.
No, I'm not really either.
Washington side of things here, look at Taillon. I mean, has struggled in the last 2 starts, but I still don't love anyone here. Like I said, I mean, Harper's always in play, but I don't find myself really excited about Washington. Trey Turner is a little bit intriguing just because there's some stolen base upside and he is heating up. But Taillon's not bad, but he's still a guy I don't like to pick on.
No, I'm not really into picking on him. Obviously, you can use Bryce Harper in this spot if you're dying to get exposure to Washington. I don't hate that. Matt Adams, if he gets in the lineup, is a fine option. Ryan Zimmerman, these guys are going to be like a stack you can look at if you're wanting to be extremely contrarian, because I don't think anyone's really going to look at him here.
I don't either. Let's move on. Colorado and Chicago. Mentioned the wind blowing out here a little bit. Got two lefties on the hill. This game is going to be popular. I'm curious if people take some shots against Leicester as well with like an Arenado or Story, just given that, some of those guys do match lefties. I don't mind them here in GPPs.
Lester's a guy that I put in my pitching article today. Like before I saw that the wind was blowing out, he was someone that I actually kind of felt comfortable with in cash because this Rockies team on the road is not good. They strike out a ton. I mean, even if you factor in just their season long numbers, which is obviously some games at Coors, 27.4% strikeout rate against lefties. We saw Caleb Smith yesterday shut them down. This is a team that struggles against left-handed pitching. They do have a 203 ISO against them, but that number actually drops significantly whenever you take them out of Coors. I put some of those numbers in the pitching articles for people to see, but I still think Lester has potential here. He has some strikeout upside. The biggest issue now is the 15 to 20 mile an hour wind that's going to be blowing there, and you have to take that in consideration when you're assessing risk whenever using John Lester in the spot. But with DJ LeMahieu potentially not in the lineup, you're going to get an extra bat like a Pat Valleca who is striking out a decent amount. You're going to get some of these other guys in here like Trevor Story, 35% strikeout rate. Like, come on.
Yeah. He also has a 342 ISO against lefties this year.
He does have a really high ISO, but he also has a really high strikeout rate. So you have to hit the ball to be able to knock it out of the park.
Very true. Great logic there by Brent. I don't mind Lester. Like the price tag at 8K on DraftKings is intriguing. His FanDuel price 8,300 isn't bad either. He's around other options where, I think there is similar risk. So I don't mind him. There's strikeout upside. But I will say, like, I will be getting some exposure to the Rockies here in tournaments with a couple of one-offs, I think, like a Story or Arenado. Desmond's somewhat intriguing as well, who's, starting to kind of come alive against lefties again this season.
They're all intriguing bats, I think. If I was getting some exposure, it would be the Arenado, the 408 ISO dating back to last season, a 10% strikeout rate. Those are pretty good numbers. It would be someone like that.
Yeah. Cubs side things here. Kyle Freeland's on the hill. Ground ball guy. Could have a decent start here. Like, the Cubs are such a boomer bust offense this year. Like, they're either lighting it up or they're just going completely blank. There are some bats that still intrigue me. Obviously, Chris Bryant came in the lineup over the weekend. Definitely would not mind him. But Wilson Contreras behind the dish I actually really like here tonight.
I do like the spot for Wilson Contreras. He's a guy that's hit lefties pretty well dating back to last season, 233 ISO, 385 WOBA, hitting the ball pretty hard and far this season, almost 92 mile an hour average exit velocity, 204 feet average distance. I do like the spot for him. Chris Bryant, generally a free square against lefties, so if you're paying up at third base, he's a great option. Albert Almora probably gets in the lineup towards the top. He's a decent option. I don't know if he's going to be what we would call a value option after he went bananas in Coors.
He's 3,400.
3,400. That's a pretty solid price there.
Yeah, he didn't move that Coors series at all.
No, he didn't. So. And then he went up for the Brewer series back at home.
Yeah, like I think for me, it's the guys that hit sliders well, just given that Freeland's throwing a slider a ton, and slider's actually been really good this year. 38% whiff rate on it. That's why Contreras stood out, 382 WOBA against sliders dating back to 2016, 203 ISO, and obviously Bryant's. Anthony Rizzo, somewhat intriguing here. Decent against sliders, and the fact that he's only 3,600, I think he's an intriguing GPP option at first base.
And he's the guy that even in a lefty on lefty matchup, like
it's wild.
Yeah, he puts up solid numbers against lefties, a 218 ISO dating back to last season, 15% strikeout rate. He's going against a pitcher that doesn't really strike anybody out anyway, so you're not necessarily concerned about that. And obviously, Baez is someone that you have to consider here as well. 242 ISO, 347 WOBA against lefties dating back to last season, and he's priced up at 4,700 on DraftKings. Second base, there's a couple options, but I'm not really in love with a lot of second basemen today.
No, and he's got potential to just be one of the crazy higher scoring guys on the slate.
Yeah.
So, Philly, Miami, kind of another meh game. Jake Arrieta, Dan Straley. I'm not really looking at Arrieta here tonight. I think I'm going to go some other directions. Given he's the most expensive pitcher on the board on DK, I kind of find myself just going other directions.
I do too, and I would have more interest in him if he was someone that I felt like had strikeout upside. And I know we just went through this with his game against the Pirates a couple games ago when we said he did have a lot of strikeout upside and he struck out 10. I think this is a different story with this Miami Marlins team. This team, if you look at it, just blanket numbers, 25.6% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching this season. But if you eliminate Lewis Brinson from that equation, just about everyone that's going to make that lineup strikes out less than 20%. Like Lewis Brinson is your only guy that brings that up because he's striking out like 40% of the time this season. So there's not a lot of strikeouts available in that lineup. And this is a team that, like, if you dig into the pitch numbers, they actually hit two seam fastballs and sinkers pretty decently. And there's not a lot of swinging strikes in the lineup with those two pitches. And those are two pitches that Arrieta is relying on pretty heavily this season.
Yeah, the sinker is 67% thrown this year. Obviously, been very solid with it. 68% ground ball rate. Not getting a ton of swing and misses on it. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, looking at these guys here, outside of Brinson, like everyone has over an 85% contact rate against sinkers dating back to 2016.
Yeah, these are guys like, and this is going to be an interesting spot. Like, if you're wanting to get, like, if you're wanting to really hedge in tournaments and you're building a bunch of lineups and you think that Arrieta is going to be a popular option, which you probably will because everyone just plugs in pitchers against the Marlins at this point. I don't necessarily hate a Marlins stack in tournaments if you're building a bunch of lineups and you're wanting to hedge on ownership.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think Bour's intriguing as a one-off.
Yeah, I always love some Justin Bourne. He's a guy that hits sinkers extremely well. Like last season, didn't have a, I mean, he had a 364 ISO against him, but a 426 xWOBA. But if you just look like Real Muto, 348 xWOBA last season, Starling Castro, 342 xWOBA, Derek Dietrich, 337 xWOBA. A lot of guys, Martin Prado, 363. A lot of these guys had decent numbers against sinkers.
Yeah, and probably just another contact bat to be able to get in the lineup. So
Yeah, I love the fact that he's actually, back from the DL. We missed that the other day whenever he was in the lineup, but he was a cheap bet to consider. He's still really, really cheap.
yeah, I think he came off the deal like after we recorded,
Yeah,
like all the news.
pretty much.
Philly side of things here, Dan Straley making his 2018 debut. I don't mind him here in GPPs. Obviously, a little risk, given it's his first start, but there is some potential. Obviously, the strikeout upside's there. Straley, definitely not a bad arm.
No, I think he gets a knock because people just like look at his name and it's like Dan Straley's sucked at his career and he's a terrible pitcher. I actually think he's cash viable on SP2 sites. Like you're not using him on FanDuel because it's pretty dumb to pay down that much at pitcher because there's really no need to do it. But like on SP2 sites, I think he has value as a cheap SP2 because he's a guy. I don't know what his pitch count's going to be. I haven't seen anything, but like he's made 3 rehab starts, so you would expect he probably goes 5 innings, maybe 6 innings, sets himself up for a win if the Marlins can put up runs, maybe notches 4, 5, maybe 6 strikeouts. Like this is a guy that we saw last season had double-digit strikeout numbers, even though like his strikeout rate 22.1%, just basically league average. But I don't know, as a guy limits contact, he's a decent pitcher, I think.
Yeah, I like him here. I think SP2 wise, like I'm with you. I definitely don't mind using him. You mentioned FanDuel, like he's 5,800. It's better than the 2K guys that they've been pricing people at. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean 5,800. Like if you use him, you could still plug in like all the high price bats and still probably have salary left over.
Yeah. The thing is, you just probably don't need to.
No, you really don't. Like it doesn't make sense. Like I think all the research that has been done, like it doesn't make sense to pay down that much at pitcher on FanDuel.
No. I don't have a ton of interest in the Philly bats. Hoskins is probably still the only one here where I just never mind against really anyone. Obviously, look at Australia. I mean, for the most part, it was kind of righties that tagged him a little bit last year, but still solid numbers.
Yeah, it'd be Hoskins and maybe like a Cesar Hernandez because again, like second base isn't somewhere that I'm like in love with a lot of options here.
Yeah. Tampa Bay, Detroit, Jordan Zimmerman taking on Jacob Faria. Faria burned last start against Baltimore. Going up against a Detroit team that you kind of expect him to do well against, given it's heavily right-handed outside of a couple of guys. None of these bats are tremendously scary. I still don't mind him in GPPs, but it's definitely one of those high-risk, high-reward situations.
How dare you disrespect Heimer Candelario and Leonis Martin like that?
I said there were a couple good bats in the lineup. Those were the guys.
I think I've set like a hard and fast rule. Like I'm just not going to play Faria on the road. I think it just comes down to that. Like, I mean, we're talking about a guy, a 52 innings sample size on the road, 5.37 ERA in his career, at home 56 innings, 2.73 ERA. Like, this is a guy, like, his StatCast numbers, average distance 212 feet this season. That doesn't bode well when you're not in a suppressing park like the Trop. And I don't know, like, there's not a lot of strikeout upside in this lineup. I just don't really see a reason to take the risk with Faria today.
You mentioned like some of the lefties there. Candelario and Leonis Martin do stand out here. I think those are the only two bats I'll consider just because they're still at cheap price tags.
I do like them. I mean, I don't even necessarily hate, like, if you wanted to get some exposure like John Hicks, if he makes the lineup, and someone, and maybe like a Castellanos, who unfortunately just has not been that great this season outside of a couple spots. But we're talking about a guy that does hit four-seam fastballs pretty well in his career.
Yeah, and warmer weather starting to kind of creep around the Midwest there.
Yep.
So, other side of things here, no interest in Jordan Zimmermann. I don't play him. I have a rule as well. It's home or away. I don't play him.
But his strikeout numbers this year,
24.7%.
His strikeouts are up this year. But so is like everything else for him. Like the runs and all that stuff. His innings are down, so that's great for him. Yeah. I'm stacking the Rays here. Like, the Rays, for those of you who have not been paying that much attention, the Rays are like one of the best teams in baseball over the past 2 weeks. And I'm 100% serious about that. Over the last 14 days, they have a league high 158 WRC plus. They're like the third lowest strikeout rate or something like that. They are actually one of the better teams in baseball over the last 2 weeks, and I definitely want to get some exposure and hope that the public just hasn't caught on to that yet.
Yeah, I do too. You mentioned everything's up this year for Zimmermann. 333 ISO allowed to right-handers, 200 ISO allowed to lefties. Average distance to right-handers over 200. Big fly ball stuff. Like, there's a lot of potential. Detroit's a decent ballpark to hit in. I definitely do like some of these bats. I think Joey Wendell is my favorite option here out of this group. But obviously, I do like guys like Carlos Gomez and Crone and Brad Miller, and sign me up for a lot of these bats here.
Denard Span, the ageless wonder, he's been fantastic this season. I think he hit another homer yesterday, but didn't he homer off Sale or Price the other day?
I think so. I think he's had 2 homers against I'm pretty sure he homered off Kimbrel too in that opening series.
He had a homer yesterday and a homer on Saturday. I think one of those was off of Price. But, like, this dude, like, if you're looking at DraftKings, he has 4 double-digit fantasy point performances over his last 10 games, 5. Dude's actually been raking recently, and he's a speed option up there as well. Like, I love Denard Span if you're going to get, like, one off, but Duffy's in a good spot. You mentioned Joey Wendell. He's in a good spot. I love Crone, the fact that he's just been raking as well. I really, really like these Rays bats, and even Daniel Robertson's someone that could end up going overlooked, and he can fill in that, like, second base spot on DraftKings.
Yeah, and you mentioned people possibly overlooking this one. I think they will, especially at all these price tags. Like, they're all super cheap. I mean, the most expensive is Denard Span at 4K.
Yeah, and don't overlook Echeverria as a value option. Like, Zimmerman's a guy this season throwing his slider 47.33% of the time. Echeverria last season against sliders 235 ISO.
Sign me up. 1 through 9 here at the Rays. We haven't said that all year.
We did against Martin Perez.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Milwaukee, Cincinnati next here. Brandon Finnegan take on Ulish Chassin. I definitely like this game a lot. I think this is one of my favorite games to kind of stack on both sides. Problem is trying to kind of figure out who I want to go with. Like, obviously on FanDuel, you can play like Votto and Aguilar and these guys in the same lineup. And some of these other options are going to be kind of contradicting each other's position eligibility. But I really like both sides of this one. Great ballpark. Chassin's pitched decent, but I still think I still don't buy into it.
It all comes down to if his slider is working for him. Like he's basically talked about how like his slider has been the biggest reason why over his last 3 starts he's held opponents to a 172 ERA and a 606 OPS. Like if that slider is working for him, then he can have some success against this Reds team. Unfortunately, if you look at their how they match up against sliders, you have some issues, especially if he's throwing it to lefties. I mean, he's throwing that about 21% of the time this season. If you look at it, you have some lefties that have some decent numbers against sliders, and that is a little bit concerning for him tonight.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think this is a boomer bust situation for the Reds. I think they do put up some runs here. I definitely do like the lefties. Like I like Votto and Jeanette a lot. I feel like Jeanette's super underpriced, and I don't mind Winker leading off there at 3-2 on DK. I'm definitely off the righties though. I think it's more the lefties that I'm intrigued with.
Yeah, I can agree there. And Votto's the guy that I do really like in the spot, and he's been really hot recently. Like he finally broke out of that slump, and he's been hitting the ball really, really well. So I do like the spot for him. Winker's in a good spot, like you said, at the top of that lineup. Scooter Gennett in a fantastic spot, and as I said a few times, like second base, not in love with a lot of options. Scooter fills that need. I do really like him, especially at his price on DraftKings at 3,600. And you can go down and look at like the Tucker Barnhart as far as a catcher option if you really want to.
Yep. And then on the Milwaukee side here, going against Finnegan, I'm assuming you have no interest in either of these pitchers, right?
No, I don't.
Okay. Just to be upfront. I definitely like these guys here. Lorenzo Cain's a guy that I have a ton of interest in there leading off. But even guys like Ryan Braun and Jesus Aguilar and whatever righty bats they toss into that lineup, even in the back half, like Manny Pina, 2,500, really interesting, deep catching option there.
I love all of the Brewers in the spot. That starts with Jesus Aguilar, who is like the key value option, I think, on the slate on DraftKings if you're trying to pay up at pitcher for Samardzija and Greinke or some of these other guys we're going to talk about. Jesus Aguilar is 3,100 on DraftKings, just way too cheap. Profiles extremely well in this matchup. I mean, Finnegan, a guy to righties, throwing his two-seam fastball 31% of the time. Jesus Aguilar, 571 ISO against two-seam fastballs last season. That's a little bit that's good. I do really, really like Lorenzo Cain as well here. I love all these bats. Even if the lefties, like whichever lefties gets in the lineup, Yelich, Shaw, it's a good spot for those guys too.
Yeah, it really is. So fire away with this game here.
Yeah, Hernan Perez is a guy to keep an eye on. Like he just has not been able to put it together this season, but he is a guy that dating back to last year, had some okay numbers against lefties, and he does hit two seamers pretty well.
Yeah, and he's usually in a decent spot. Like he's usually hitting like sixth in the order, which is a good spot there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Kansas City and Boston, Eduardo Rodriguez taking on Jason Hamill. I don't mind some Eduardo Rodriguez here tonight up against this, Kansas City lineup that strike out much more against lefties than they do against righties.
Yeah, he's a guy that actually made it in the pitching article. I think he has value in the spot. He's going to have to work around a couple bats that I think could get him in trouble. But if he does, this Royals team, 25% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching this season. It's a good park for him. That's going to help negate his batted ball distance that I'm trying to find now, but I believe is up this season. I can't find him in my notes.
Yeah, a little bit. Averages is 175 this year.
Yeah, it's up a little bit, so that's a little concerning. But oh no, I guess it's not. I guess it's down. Was 192 last season, but yeah, it's still a good spot for him.
Yeah, I like him here. Like you said, couple bats here. Obviously, like a Salvador Perez from the right side is somewhat worrisome. Jorge Soler, in a limited 2018 sample size against lefties, is starting to kind of look like what they expect him to do against lefties. And he is just crushing left-handers whenever he gets the bat on the ball.
Yeah, he is. And the thing that this is what I was trying to figure out what I was noting about the park factor for Rodriguez. The Royals this season, 40% hard contact to lefties. That is the only real concerning part. But again, in that park, that is somewhat negated by the fact that Kaufman is very cavernous. But it's like Jorge Soler and Alcides Escobar are guys that are doing a lot of that hard hit.
This game's at Fenway here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So probably even more concerning at Fenway.
It is. I had it flipped. That is my bad.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely worrisome. But if he faces a good amount of lefties like, Moose, Duda, John Jay Gordon, these guys are actually projecting the line and get in the lineup. Um, Obviously, I'm much more okay with it.
Yeah, we do have to keep an eye though. There is rain in this game, so
Yeah, that's true. We can't forget Whit Merrifield either here.
no, he's really good against lefties. 366 WOBA dating back to last season, 232 ISO.
Yeah, but still like Eduardo Rodriguez. I think he's more of an SP2 guy here tonight.
Yeah, it's just strikeout upside, and on a slate like this, I don't see a ton of guys with a lot of strikeout potential.
No, with you. Boston side of things here, kind of dug into Hamill a little bit. Definitely overperforming this season. XFIP over 5 this year. Was digging into some of his expected WOBA numbers, 314 to righties, over 360 to lefties so far this season. So obviously there is some regression coming for him. Guy I really, really like tonight is Andrew Benintendi. Guy who hits sliders really, really well. And obviously Hamill's a guy who's throwing a slider 36% of the time this year.
Yeah, I think the Red Sox are going to be a popular option here, and for a good reason. Hamill is terrible, and we've noted this several times. He's not a guy that generally gives up a lot of home runs, but he gives up a ton of runs, and that bodes well for just about everyone in this lineup. I do like Benintendi here. Jackie Bradley Jr. is a guy towards the bottom of the lineup that I do really like as well. I would not be afraid to get exposure to the bottom of that lineup, which is going to be, like I said, Jackie Bradley Jr., Sue Lin, and a couple guys like that, because that bottom of the lineup can do damage as well.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to see what Boston rolls out. Whether like a Mitch Moreland gets in the lineup. Obviously, Mookie Betts is questionable with the hamstring injury. Saw Eduardo Nunez lead off yesterday. God, Mitch Moreland just absolutely crushing the ball. Average air distance this year off righties 330.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so if he corrects the lineup, I don't mind him.
Yeah, the problem is like
So many first base options.
so many first base options.
Yeah, but FanDuel, Moreland's probably more of a FanDuel play.
Yeah, probably.
Where you play too. But yeah, like the Boston bats here. I still don't even hate the righties of like a JD Martinez or if Mookie gets in the left, or they're guys that are always in play.
Yeah, I mean, I do love those guys as well. I think Nunez is a fantastic option. My biggest issue with Martinez in this spot is like I need home runs at that price, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You can't take the 0 for 4, 1 for 4 with a double at that price.
Yeah, and like I know Mookie Betts is even more expensive at 5.7 on DraftKings, but he's a guy that makes better contact, strikes out less, has stolen base upside. So I feel more comfortable paying that price for him than I do JD Martinez.
Yeah, I agree. I don't mind Bogarts as well at shortstop.
Yeah, he's still hitting the ball really, really well this season.
Yeah. New York and Houston. Sonny Gray taking on Charlie Morton.
Yeah, the fraud taking on the guy that's going to regress, according to everybody. Still,
Yeah, apparently it's -6 FanDuel points or whatever he put up last start was his regression game. But
all the regression truthers, they got to rejoice last game.
I like me some Charlie Morton here. Definitely at risk against the Yankees team that obviously can put up runs at any time. But this is still a team that is, carrying a decent strikeout rate this season. It's not as high as what I expected, obviously, but you got some of these guys like Gregorius, who has a sub 10% strikeout rate against lefties. Torres in 20 at bats against righties doesn't have, a high strikeout rate, but these guys do strike out quite a bit.
Yeah, and I kind of noted this in the pitching article. Like I struggled trying to decide between Greinke and Charlie Morton in the spot, because I feel like the strikeout upside for both is somewhat identical, and the risk associated with both is somewhat identical because they're both facing lineups that do have a decent amount of power. I think I'm going to continue to ride Charlie Morton as far as a guy like I want to stack again. I want to take pitchers against the Yankees, because there's going to be games where these guys like just nobody does anything. Like you might get a 2-run shot from Gary Sanchez, and that might be the only damage they do an entire game. And they rack up, and pitchers do rack up like 6, 7, 8 strikeouts. And the Yankees are always a popular option because there are a ton of power bats in that lineup. Biggest concern is the roof is expected to be open. The weather is supposed to be nice, and the wind is supposed to be blowing out. So that does give me a little bit of concern. But again, in tournaments, Charlie Morton, a fine option.
Yeah, he definitely is. Did you have interest in anyone here from the Yankees side? Like you look at Morton this year, like a little bit of struggles. Like he's been really, really dominant against lefties, just because he just hammers that curveball in there.
If I was looking at anyone, I would look at like Miguel Andujar and some of these guys maybe towards the bottom of that lineup that may be overlooked from the masses, like Andujar, Gleyber Torres. I don't hate Gary Sanchez here.
No, I don't either. But I just find myself like the pay up options. I'd rather go elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Houston side of things, Sonny Gray's been awful this year. 405 will allowed to righties, 352 to lefties. I definitely like some of the righties here against him. He's allowing a ton of hard contact, 37%. Problem is just not a lot of these right-handed bats from Houston are doing much against righties this year.
No, they're really not. Like, unfortunately, like the Astros have been in most of these outings a pretty big disappointment. If you want to stack the Altuves, the Springers, the Bregmans, Gurriels, feel free. Like, I actually think I like Marwin and Reddick a little bit more in the spot. Like Reddick is a guy that has historically hits two seam fastballs pretty well. And that's something like Gray's not throwing it a ton to lefties, only 14% this season. But there's been issues with Gray in the past where like all of his fastballs basically look the same and they all move the same, and there's no real discernible difference between them. So I don't know. Reddick feels like a guy that could be in a good spot, and Marwin as well, another guy that I do have a lot of interest in here.
Yep, and two of the kind of cheaper options from this Houston side.
Yeah, and Marwin's always a guy that goes overlooked, and he actually hits right-handed pitching extremely well, like a 221 ISO, 387 WOBA dating back to last season.
Yeah, and Reddick's power numbers have been absurd this year.
So, that happens whenever you have like two home run
games. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Reddick I feel like is underpriced. Like 3.9 on DK is a really nice price tag on him. Marwin's 3.2, also outfield eligible first base, but I'd probably use him in the outfield.
I probably would too.
So, Toronto, Minnesota. Aaron Sanchez is taking on Lance Lynn. I don't have interest in either of these pitchers.
No, I really don't either. Like Sanchez has been like not terrible, but also not like really, really good. Like he has 4 quality starts in his 5 outings. He's generating a decent amount of ground balls. I mean, 51% dating back to last season. But I just don't want to use him here in the spot against the Twins. I just don't see the upside. And obviously Lance Lynn, like I wish the Blue Jays had more lefties to punish him. But the ones that they do are guys that I think can really get to him in this spot.
Yeah, I do too. Let's start with some of these Minnesota bats. You mentioned like it's the ground ball rate. Like Sanchez is allowing a decent amount of base runners. He's just not allowing a ton of home run and upside like that. But I think this is a spot where some of these guys can get to him. Once again, Eddie Rosario underpriced, grades out really well, which I should just get one of those tape things and record myself saying that because he's just so good and so underpriced. I mean, you look at Sanchez throwing his changeup about 35% this year. Rosario 414 WOBA, 283 ISO against changeups dating back to 2016. I love Eddie Rosario once again.
He profiles extremely well against like every single pitch imaginable for the most part. Like he's just a good all around freaking hitter. You mentioned Sanchez throwing that changeup a decent amount. I'm pulling it up now. Eduardo Escobar is a name that kind of stands out to me. 286 ISO against changeups last season. I don't know if people realize like Eduardo Escobar has been hitting the ball extremely well this year. I think he's a very overlooked part of this Twins team, and I think if I'm getting one-off exposure, it might be Escobar over Rosario for me.
I like that call, and definitely will be more contrarian.
Yeah, and he's a guy like third base, shortstop eligible. Like if you're wanting a cheaper shortstop option, he's 3,800 on DraftKings. That's a pretty good price.
You know who grades up pretty well against singers and changeups is Logan Morrison. But I can't do it tonight. I would not be surprised if he homered.
I cannot do it myself, but he has been a little bit better recently, but like I should qualify that by a little bit better than what he was doing earlier this season is like a hit per game.
Yes. Like reaching on air, getting on base is better than what he's doing earlier this year.
It is.
So, anyone else there? If Max Kepler gets in the lineup, I don't hate him as a one-off contrarian option.
Yeah, Kepler's fine. I don't hate Dozier. Sano, keep an eye on him. He is questionable. I know he's been dealing with a hamstring injury.
Yeah. You and I, it's funny, we talked about this Toronto side of things here. We're like, oh, Toronto against Lance, let's stack some lefties. And then we're like, oh, there's only like a couple of lefties in this lineup to take advantage. But Lance Lynn's still really struggling against left-handers. Hard contact rate 38%, 468 will go out, 308 ISO allowed this year to lefties. Good ballpark here. It's like 80 degrees. I love Target Field when it warms up. Guys like Smoke, Solarte, Granderson, really all intriguing options here tonight.
Yeah, we were kind of looking at what lefties can get to Lance Lynn here, and the Grandy man can. I really do like him in the spot as like, especially if he's going to lead off. We're talking about a guy that's hit right-handed pitching extremely well. 355 WOBA, 253 or 254 ISO dating back to last season. I love him in the spot. Yangervis Solarte, I really do not understand what this dude has to do to get his price increased across the industry. I mean, 3,200 on FanDuel. He's 3,400 on DraftKings. Like, this dude is raking, absolutely raking this season. He's like a free square almost every single day. I love him here. Smoke, if you want to roll him out, feel free. Even Teoscar Hernandez, like, I know he's a righty, but still continues to hit the ball really, 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 really well.
Yeah, average exit velocity 97 for Hernandez this year off righties. Like, he's been dialed in.
Yeah, looking at this, Lance Lynn's two-seam fastball, he's throwing it 37% of the time against lefties this season. Curtis Granderson, 408 ISO against two-seam fastballs last season.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you can do a front four stack at Toronto here with Hernandez included and 3 lefties.
Yeah, you can.
So, yeah, good option. That's another game that I really like on both sides. One of the higher run totals on the slate as well.
Yes.
Digging into the 2 later games, LA and Arizona. Ross tripling on this slate for Zach Greinke. I don't mind Greinke. Like you said, he's kind of tied up there with Morton as far as, it's basically the same thing. There is some risk, obviously, against some of these lefty bats, but there is some strikeout upside as well.
There is definitely some strikeout upside. We have seen the Dodgers at times this season just completely disappear at the plates. Greinke has been somewhat inconsistent. Like, if you look at it, like his home starts have been good and his road starts have been bad. 2 home starts, 1.27 ERA. He's 1-2 with a 7.27 ERA on the road. Has not necessarily been terrible or great against the Dodgers. He's 5-4 in 12 starts against them, dating since he's been with Arizona. Like, I think this is a spot, like I said, and like I mentioned in the pitching article, there is strikeout upside. This Dodgers team, especially over the past couple weeks, has been a little bit worse. I think there are worse places you can go as like a starting pitcher option tonight.
Yeah, looking at stuff, like, it's going to come down to, and this is, you can say it's for a numerous amount of pitchers, but it's going to come down to the off-speed stuff just because his fastball is actually getting crushed this year. But everything else, like his off-speed stuff, incredible whiff rates on all 3 of them. His curveball, changeup, slider. A lot of these Dodgers guys don't have a ton of great options against off-speed stuff. Like, I would love to see Greinke just go out there and just ditch a fastball.
He very well could. I mean, I think he knew coming into the season, like, his fastball was not
down. Yeah, like he's averaging 88 this year.
Yeah, like, and he knew that coming into the season, and so if he's going to stop throwing that as much, like, he could have some success. Like, he's throwing his changeup 47% of the time to lefties. That's incredible.
Yeah, so he's got to keep that up here.
Yeah.
I don't really like any of the bats here. I think Yasmani Grandal is interesting. You get the former catcher against the pitcher, which I do think is a thing. Obviously, Grandal just does have power. And lefties do have a 245 ISO off Greinke this year. So, I mean, there's definitely the risk. And I think Grandal's a guy who does stand out.
What about Chase Utley? He mashes changeups. He had a 333 ISO against him last season.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's mostly just Grandal, maybe a Bellinger or like a Puig. I mean, like Greinke's only throwing his changeup 21% of the time, but last season Yasiel Puig 917 ISO and 12 at bats against changeups.
Jeez, yeah, Seager pissed me off over the weekend. I didn't play over the weekend. I was busy, and I've been playing Seager a lot lately, and I think he homered off Cueto in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But that's baseball. Arizona here. I'm curious to see their ownership tonight against Stripling. I don't know. Like, I don't love them, but I don't hate them either.
I don't necessarily have a lot of interest in them. Like Stripling is a guy that's like not terrible strikeout stuff. I mean, about 25% dating back to last season, decent contact numbers. I mean, 75% contact rate. Lefties 23% hard contact, righties 30% hard contact. Like, I mean, righties 322 WOBA allowed to them. Like, these numbers aren't terrible. I mean, 1.48 homers per 9 to righties, so maybe some right-handed bats here.
Yeah, there's just the numbers don't jump out here. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't like it. Like, I like so many first base options. It's kind of hard to rule out Goldschmidt, but I don't love it. I think Pollock's interesting. I think Pollock might be the guy that I have the most interest in.
Pollock's a little interesting. Cattell Marte, a guy like if you're looking, Stripling's a very slider heavy pitcher, throwing it this season 30% of the time to lefties. Cattell Marte, 321 ISO last season against it. We're in the same situation we were the other day with Tyson Ross, who is a guy who's throwing his slider a ton. Like we're talking, he was throwing it over 40% of the time. And Stripling is a very slider heavy pitcher, and this is a team and the Diamondbacks that has a lot of swinging strikes as sliders in that lineup. So I'm not saying Stripling's a guy that I would be looking at and like to use because I don't know how deep he goes in this game. I mean, he's only pitched in relief this season. I think if you look, like 31 pitches is the most 37 pitches is the most he's thrown this season. So maybe he goes 60, 65. He might get 4.5, 4 2/3, maybe 5 innings. I don't think I would use him, but at 4K, that's not, I guess that expectation isn't terrible.
I don't think so either. Like, if he was stretched out a little bit more, I would have some interest. He's going to be the opposite of Tyson Ross, who threw, like 130 pitches in that start against Arizona.
Yeah, that was crazy. But yeah, like if you need salary on SP2 sites, which I don't know why you would, but if you need it, Stripling, I guess, could get you like 15 fantasy points.
Yeah. But I mean, you also have Dan Straight at 6,300, so
yeah.
If you need it, Yeah, I don't have a ton of interest in Arizona here, despite a reasonably high total.
Yeah, like I said, it'd be like Cattell Marte or a Pollock or something like that.
Yeah. Last game here, Padres and Giants. Erik Lauer taking on Jeff Samardzija. Samardzija, third start of the year, starting the DL. Decent start in his first start. Didn't look great against Washington. I definitely don't mind him here at his price. Obviously, there's some upside against, any right-handed pitcher against the Padres is going to have some upside with their strikeout rate. And Samardzija in this ballpark has, historically pitched well.
Yeah, control's been the issue for Shark so far this season. 7 walks and 8 2/3 innings. It's not like him. I mean, dating back to last season, he's like a 1.62 walks per 9. I would expect the more he pitches, the better like he gets as far as his control. A good spot for him. I mean, hard contact to lefties dating back to last season, 32.7%. That's a little concerning, but the park kind of negates that. I like the spot for him. He's a guy that I feel pretty comfortable with in cash games. Even though this Padres team does hit the ball pretty darn hard, 36% against righties this season, they're still striking out 28% of the time. So there's a little bit of risk because these Padres can be pesky, especially when you have like Franchy Cordero who can hit home runs on the freaking moon and a couple of these other bats. But I think Shark is one of the safer options on the board.
I do too. And you mentioned the only interesting bat from San Diego on this slate, and that's Cordero.
Good old Franchy. Unfortunately, he does strike out a lot, and so that kind of negates the power upside for him. I mean, we're talking about a guy in 119 at bats against right-handed pitching, 40% strikeout rate, but also a 255 ISO, 329 WOBA. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Giants side of things here. Erik Lauer, obviously one star under his belt in the majors, which was in Coors, and he got crushed. I don't mind some of these Giants bats. If you're looking like for some value, like Cutchin at 3.5 is interesting. Like Posey against a lefty for 3.7 is not bad behind the dish. If you just need a guy. They have Gorkis Fernandez projected lead off, which I don't know. I don't know why they would, but I don't mind the two right-handed bats there. It's probably a tough for me on the Giants side.
Yeah, we get regression candidate Erik Lauer on the mound. Staking my claim on that one. Whenever he actually comes out and pitches a better game than he did in Coors, there's the regression for you. I like the righties here. Like obviously Lauer's numbers against righties are not going to be as bad as they were on Coors. That being said, it's still a lefty. I mean, McCutchen 420 WOBA dating back to last season, 318 ISO. Excellent spot for him. I like Posey. You mentioned Gorkis Hernandez. Like he's been like he had to lead off because they were like a bunch of people were out last game. Nick Hundley is interesting at catcher. If you're not using Posey, he's a guy that's absolutely mashed lefties dating back to last season. Even someone like Alan Hansen, who's minimum salary on FanDuel, I kind of think he could be in play here if he makes the lineup.
Yeah, I kind of got to see this lineup because, like, I think Austin Slater got into the lineup the other day. He's like a 2K punt too.
Yeah, they're a little banged up right now. Like you have Babe Ruth on the DL. I think someone got scratched yesterday. Panic was scratched yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
He went to the DL on Saturday. There's someone else that got scratched over the weekend. But yeah, so they're a little banged up. So we'll just kind of have to see that lineup. But anybody that gets in that lineup could be an option here.
Yeah, and Lauer threw 75% fastballs in that start against Colorado.
I wonder if that just comes down to like he knew he was in Colorado and breaking stuff doesn't really work that well in Colorado, so he didn't try to throw it.
He didn't throw a breaking pitch at all. Like fastball cutter, fastball sinker, just forcing.
Yeah, so that's a little bit interesting.
So I don't know. And a lot of those guys do rake because he throws a low 90s fastball. Yeah, Giants could be actually kind of a sneaky option here tonight.
They could. They'll definitely be overlooked, and I know people don't like targeting bats in that park, and late night stacks generally go overlooked.
They do, but a ton of extra base hit upside there.
Yeah, and even some potential for like a Longo Dongo.
It's true. Yeah, he's been heating up a little bit of late.
Yeah, he has. I was actually cheering for him the other night because I needed him to get to Alex Wood, so that I could secure a ticket to a final on fantasy draft, and I actually got a Longo like RBI double that secured that for me.
Ooh, humble brag.
Yeah, buddy.
Oh man, that's it for us. Let's go home run calls here tonight. Who do you got?
Man, this is tough. I'm going to go Jesus Aguilar and the Grandy Man.
Well, I get. Give me my chalk call will be Joey Votto. Keeps it going. As far as contrarian, I'm gonna go Justin Bour.
There you go.
So that's it for us. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for our tools and content, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good luck tonight.